The Beatles were falling apart. John Lennon couldn't stand Paul McCartney anymore, Paul couldn't stand John anymore, and everyone had to put up with Yoko Ono sitting in the studio all the time. They were recording the White Album, that messy double album, and the sessions turned into a battlefield. It was in this tense atmosphere that Paul brought a song he had written in India. Something cheerful, silly, with a grandmotherly feel to it. John looked at it and wrinkled his nose. He called it granny music shit. But he didn't imagine that this simple song would become one of the band's best known, and that even disliking it, he would end up influencing a decisive version of it.
Happy ever after in a marketplace. Yes, we listen to
It all started when Paul returned from India with a phrase in his head. He had heard it from a Nigerian friend who played congas and thought it sounded philosophical. He sat in his room at the ashram and wrote the entire song, a lighthearted story about Desmond and Molly, a happy couple, children running in the yard, a simple life. When he showed it to the others, John already turned up his nose. He thought it was corny, childish. But Paul was a perfectionist. He wanted it perfect. They recorded a version with outside musicians, saxophonists, playing congas. Paul listened to it and hated it. He ordered it to be redone from scratch. It was an unusual situation, even for the band. The band entered the studio in July 1968, and the atmosphere was heavy. John was emotionally unstable and increasingly distant from the sessions, and he made no secret of the fact that this music wasn't his style. Paul insisted, take after take, changing the rhythm, searching for a Jamaican ska groove that he couldn't quite explain. On July 8th, Paul announced that he wanted to start all over again. John stormed out of the studio, and many people thought he wouldn't be back that day. A few hours later, he reappeared, visibly altered, and went straight to the piano. Engineer Jeff Emmerich recounts that he came in yelling that he was completely stoned and started playing the song much faster and more aggressively. Paul was surprised, but realized that that energy worked. They recorded that version, with John making comments and jokes. Strangely, despite the tension, that take had a lightness that no one expected. Even so, Jeff Emmerich ended up quitting shortly afterwards, tired of the atmosphere in the sessions. When the album came out, John didn't change his mind. He continued to call the song granny music, crappy grandma music. He said it was sad, simplistic, too commercial. He saw it as the perfect example of Paul wasting his time making children's music while he, John, was doing more experimental things like Revolution 9. But there was a problem. The song became a hit, not as a Beatles single. They didn't officially release it as a single in the US and UK at the time, but the group Marmalade did a version that reached #1 on the British charts at Christmas, 1968. Everyone knew it, and John had to hear it on every radio station, everywhere, knowing that he had helped create it, even if he didn't like it. He never hid his disdain. Years later, when a journalist asked about the song, he blurted out that he thought it was rubbish, that it was Paul being Paul, making Broadway musical songs. But he always omitted one part. That July night, when he returned to the studio and sat down at the piano angrily, he ended up influencing the version that became famous. It was that aggressive energy that provided the missing spice. Paul, of course, always defended the song. He said it was simple, yes, but it was honest, that it spoke of universal things, family, love, children running in the yard, that everyone understood from anywhere in the world. And he was right. The song became one of the Beatles' best known, played at parties, in commercials, in movies. But the greatest irony is that John, even though he didn't like it, ended up being essential. Without that night when he came home drunk and unleashed that anger on the piano, the song might have followed a very different path within the White Album. He spent years bitter about it, thinking it represented everything he wanted to avoid at that moment in the band. George Harrison wasn't too fond of it either. He even joked about the phrase in Savoy Truffle.
We all know blah-dee-blah-da.
A subtle dig at the atmosphere during the sessions. So it was 2 against 1, with Ringo in the middle, just wanting to finish the job and go home. Today, Obla-Dee Obla-Da is one of the most played Beatles songs on streaming platforms. People sing it without knowing the tense story behind it. They don't know that it almost ended the band, that it made the sound engineer quit, that it was born during a heavy phase of the 1968 sessions. John died in 1980, still talking about the song as an example of Paul's lighter side. He never publicly said he had saved the track, but he also never denied participating in that final version. Paul, on the other hand, played it live thousands of times. He included it in practically every tour, and whenever asked about John's story, he shrugged. If he hated it so much, why did he come back that night and play the piano? He would ask. Nobody knows the answer. John Lennon spent years criticizing Obla Di Obla Da, seeing in it everything he thought was wrong with the Beatles at that moment. He thought it was corny, too commercial. And yet, on a July night in 1968, altered and out of his mind, he gave the song exactly what it needed. Hate what you create, but sometimes hate is more creative than love. And sometimes your greatest contribution is the one you make wanting to destroy everything. John never understood that, but the music is still there, playing everywhere, proving him wrong. And perhaps that's Paul's sweetest revenge. So that's it, man. If you enjoyed this bizarre story of hate, heroin, and a song that half the band wanted to bury alive, leave a like. It doesn't cost anything and really helps us keep bringing you this crap. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment below if you already knew about this feud with John Lennon wanting to kill Paul because of this song, or if there's any other story about band feuds that we should tell here. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.